Hey everyone, you're listening to Dirt Grow Podcast with your host, David Burma. Episode number 7 in Dirt Grow Podcast. Very excited about this. And awesome, exciting guest we have today. Something a little different, a little change it up, you know. So last couple were farmers. We had a fella from manufacturing and agriculture and that kind of stuff. So we'll change it up again today, and we got a special guest, a little bit of background. I don't know all the background, but he's had years and years and years working for the government, OMAFRA. He's a corn specialist for many, many years, probably 20 plus years. And he's kind of moving on into a little bit other fields. He is also an auctioneer, I believe, at his pastime. I don't know if it's a full-time thing, but we definitely heard him doing a little bit of auctioneering. So anyways, I want to introduce you. Super excited about introducing you to Greg Stewart. He's going to sit here today and talk to us a little bit about his past, a little bit back through his journey, and get some exciting news about, you know, what went down, what his journey through life was, where's agriculture today, how do you see agriculture in the future, and what things we got to look forward to. So, start off, Greg. I know this is your first podcast.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, your first podcast, which is super exciting. And tell me, you know, I don't know much about you, and I should have done more research, but honestly I haven't. So you might need to tell us a little bit of your journey, from, you know, high school. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm in the unfortunate spot, David, where I have more past to talk about than I have future, and you're reinforcing that idea for me today. Yeah, talk about your past because you've got a lot of it.
Well, that's for sure. The past is for sure.
The past is for sure.
For sure. Yeah, that one's done. We don't know about the future, so we want to learn from our past, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up on a farm somewhere between Peterborough and Lindsay.
Okay.
Right? So, you know, most people say, well, dude, that's not very farming-oriented landscape.
Right.
And my dad say, oh, yeah, you know, we get to farm both sides of the hill, right? It's all about solar interception, and you can get a little bit on both sides of the hill. And so I grew up on a farm in between Peterborough and Lindsay, and, you know, always just sort of interested. If there was one thing that really appealed to me, it was sort of the soil-plant combination, that interaction between soil and plant.
Yeah.
And then if you throw a bit of machinery in on top of that, some equipment, some iron, some black smoke, that's really sort of what
drives you.
Turned my crank growing up, and sort of has stuck with me most of my life, most of my career, that whole agronomic, try to understand what makes plants and soils and equipment, and many farmers, you know, I'm sort of just a glorified farmer, a poor but glorified farmer, where, you know, lots of growers, producers are intrigued by that whole interaction. You know, what do I do to the soil? What crop do I pick? How do I pick it? How do I fertilize it? What equipment can I use? That whole big integrated mess, I think, excites lots of us, and it always did me.
Yeah. So do you have a farm now?
No.
So your dad, how many acres would he have farmed back in the day?
Yeah, we got up maybe to 1,000 acres.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so it was a rocky out there? Is it?
Yes. I'm one of the few people around who have picked stones with a stone boat. Are you familiar, David, with the idea of a stone boat?
No idea.
Down here in God's country where you have to go looking for a rock. Well, a stone boat was essentially 2 big pieces of pine board. They must have had some big pine trees up in Peterborough in the early days, right? And essentially it was just formed into a platform that you dragged around the field. No wheels involved, a stone boat. And
you pull a tractor?
You pull with a tractor. Yeah. But of course, it allowed you to roll those big, ugly Peterborough stones onto the stone boat, right?
Yeah.
And not have to lift them up. And of course, if you didn't have a tractor and a loader, which was, you know, I'm really dating myself. We did have a tractor and a loader, but it wasn't always available for the stone picking people. And so you could roll the stones on, the big ones especially, and then drag them to the fence bottom, and then with a little help from gravity, you roll them off again.
Wow.
So,
and that was a yearly thing?
Yeah. Now, to be fair, the stone boat is my early childhood memories, and we moved on to loaders and tractors and wagons and even rock pickers at one time, if you could imagine.
Wow. So At what age did you move off the farm, Greg?
Yeah, I don't know. When did I move off the farm? I came back and worked on the farm during my university years a fair bit.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I sort of kind of gave up on agriculture a little bit.
No, really?
And this would sort of be mid-'90s now. I had done my master's. I had looked around in agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. And then I said, maybe teaching school/farming would be the better fit for me. I'd known some neighbor friends up in the hills of Peterborough who had sort of done that. And so I sort of paused agriculture for a while, went to the University of Western, did my Bachelor of Education, got my teaching certificate, and we moved back to Peterborough thinking I would teach school/farm on the side, or maybe farm/teach school on the side. The premier at the time, Bob Ray, had other ideas for my future because I could not get even an interview for a teaching job, far less an actual job. So then I quickly moved over to selling John Deere equipment at a local John Deere dealership, and that was all good. But life was busy, and then OMAFRA sort of reorganized themselves and created these corn specialist or provincial lead positions. And I looked at that, and I looked at what I was doing, which was, okay, but
right.
I was farming. I was still working at Guelph for a little bit, and I was selling John Deere for 40 hours a week, and I don't know, life was really hectic. And I said, maybe we should just retreat back to Guelph and take this OMAFRA position, and that's what we did.
So how important was, spending time in that dealership? Did that help you out a bunch, communicating with people and selling, or not so much? Was that of any?
Yeah, I'd be a much better salesperson today than I was the day I took that job at John Deere.
Yeah.
I had more of a academic, go to school, do your master's, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so I do much better at selling today than I did in 1993 when Evergreen Farm and Garden up at Orono, Ontario hired me. Yeah. I mean, here's the classic thing that you will explain my problem. So I had an office out in the showroom.
Right.
I had a bit of a bulletin board behind me. As much as it embarrasses me to say this now, I pinned up on the board behind me publications, scientific publications of things that I had done on compaction or tillage or whatever, and put those on the board thinking that growers that came in would talk to me or look at the board and talk to me. And
Right.
I said, oh my gosh, if I could rewind that clock.
Right.
I said, who on earth puts that up that thinks that any one in a million grower might be interested in that? So the real piece of this learning puzzle is the guy that replaced me in that dealership on that bulletin board, he took pictures of guys that had bought something from him holding a dozen donuts.
Right.
The contrast. Oh,
yes.
well, we have the, we have the scientific publication on how low inflation pressure on tires will improve your bottom line versus just a smiling guy who had just bought a John Deere tractor and a dozen donuts that the salesperson had delivered to him. Wow. Anyway, that was far better approach than the scientific publication approach.
Right. There was no training for you at that point in time. They just set you in a job and said, go sell.
Well, my boss was a seasoned veteran of the equipment industry and tried to absolutely steer me. But mostly I look back and think, wow, just the what's sort of stuck in your head at sometimes isn't always the right place to start.
Right.
And you learn that as you go.
So just this is not what we're talking about, but on the sales front, because I love sales.
Yeah.
What is the right methodology? What are customers looking for?
Well, as much as it sounds a bit cliche, it's really difficult to break out of that win strategy, which is the relationship, the connection, the trust, right? And, as much as I sort of thought more scientifically,
Right,
or I
right.
thought more, oh, well, we have to prove that this tractor is better, or that baler is better, or that this is the right no-till drill. You know, at the end of the day, so much of our decisions are based on emotion and connection and feeling like you trust the guy, right?
Right.
That
You trust him that he's not going to steer you wrong.
that you just can't avoid that as much as you want to give the right facts.
I agree.
You just have to have the guy's trust. In fact, a fun story from that day of trying to sell equipment, and clearly I wasn't that good at it, or I wouldn't have moved on, right? But you know, the idea that you could see the guy across the desk, and you know, this was sort of a little bit pre-computer driven,
Yep.
you know, spreadsheets and quote machines, right? I had a piece of paper and a pencil in front of me, and I was always intrigued by the person sitting across from the desk really wanting to know what the heck I was writing down on that piece of paper that was arriving at the final price of the equipment, right?
Right.
And you know, I remember one time I said, hey, you know, I think this is sort of bothering you. And I obviously didn't do this all the time, but I just turned the piece of paper around and said, hey, there it is. There's the whole deal. This is what we're paying. This is what it cost me to get it set up. This is my commission. This is the whole 9 yards, right? Don't worry about it. Just there it is. And of course, I would not. A salesperson would normally not do that.
Right.
But in this particular day that I remember, I was sort of frustrated by the lack of trust
Confidence,
that he was,
yep.
confidence that he was. And I said, here's the whole deal, including what I'm going to take home to buy milk, to buy milk and bread for my kids. It's all there. And he bought the tractor.
Yeah. He bought it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. It's interesting how, you know, I think we ignore that. You know, the person that says, no, I'm never sold to it from a salesman. Like, I can go to a dealership and no problem. I'm like, you're the first one that's going to be sold to. If you believe that no salesman is going to sell to you, and you believe in that kind of structure, that you have that ability, you have no understanding of the ability of influence,
right,
and connection,
yeah.
Right? Because the right salesman, the right person knows how to connect with you, that knows how to hit you right. It won't be about what car you're buying or what tractor you're buying. It's about that person being able to connect with you, and if he or she can connect with you, you're buying.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're buying.
And what rises to the top on that is probably trust.
Yeah.
Right? You
100%.
just absolutely,
Yeah.
you can't have, you're not going to open your wallet if in the back of your mind you say, geez, I really don't know whether I trust what this guy's saying to me. Right?
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, sales is so powerful. So you've done a little bit of John Deere. OMAFRA opens up an opportunity.
Yeah.
You go to OMAFRA. And so now you're going to OMAFRA. Do you even know where you're going? You know what's your first job there? What do you?
Yeah. Well, so that was the interesting combination, is that I had actually never given up a little bit of a position at the university in the crop science department, or what it was called then, the crop science department. So my old mentor, Tony Vine, was the cropping systems professor, and I had worked for him, and I'd sort of held on to that position a little bit. And so I had an office in the crop science department. And when the OMAFRA sort of new vision for what an OMAFRA person would look like, it became this trifecta. Ontario corn producers wanted to have a bit of influence on the job, so they participated with some funding and with some connection to the job. And of course, OMAFRA was the key, person who was driving it and writing the checks, right? And then the University of Guelph agreed, well, we'll be part of this triangle as well. Corn producers, University of Guelph, and OMAFRA. And I sort of became one of the first provincial specialists. Mine was corn. But it really became a really beautiful combination, because I loved working with the corn producers, happy to be an OMAFRA employee, and they left me at the university in the crop science building, or plant ag department, where I had been for years and years and years. And so we just moved on from kind of where I was, but now I got an office, and I didn't have to worry about where my paycheck was coming, because OMAFRA was going to sign that. In my days working as a research assistant at the university, I was always writing grants and proposals, because I had to put enough money in the trust account to actually have a salary, et cetera, et cetera. Well, those concerns left, and so it became this really a beautiful combination. university people treated me like I was a university person. OMAFRA treated me like I was an OMAFRA person. Corn producers treated me like I was one of them.
Yep.
And that allowed me to just charge forward and tackle a whole bunch of stuff, probably with some guidance from some university professors. The number one item that sort of floated to the top was, we need to update our nitrogen recommendations for corn in the province, because we got a mishmash, hodgepodge combination of, well, you're maybe old enough to remember, but the map of Ontario was divided into county blocks, and different county blocks had different recommendations for nitrogen on corn. And everyone said, so when I step from Perth to Oxford, I have a different recommendation for my corn crop in terms of how much nitrogen it needs. And so I got blessed. I got lucky that a colleague of mine, Ken Janovic, and we went together and started building a nitrogen database that gathered all the nitrogen research that had ever been done in Ontario, putting it into a huge database. And then all the credit to Ken Janovic, we started to actually, okay, what really makes sense in terms of end recommendations? What is the previous crop credit? Should we be looking at soil type? Does it matter whether you're an Essex or a Laura in terms of how much nitrogen you should use? And what came out of that, with support from, again, like I said, OMAFRA, corn producers, the university, was what we thought at the time was one of the most sophisticated nitrogen recommendation tools around, which was the OMAFRA N calculator.
Yeah. And I've actually used that calculator quite a bit.
Cool.
Yeah. No, so I'm a big proponent. Well, the product we handle is just going out and do those nitrate tests. When's the date? June to do the testing?
June? So June 10th is a good day.
Yeah. So we do our testing that time and get the parts per million, right?
Yep.
Back, and then you go on the graph, right? And you draw that across, and based on the parts per million, you know what amount of nitrogen you want to get based on the potential yield. Right. So I've used that graph a lot, and I mean, I can't tell how many people I recommend to livestock farmers. Like livestock farmers, I always tell them, go and take your nitrate test, because you're putting all this manure on. And a lot of these guys are still putting lots of nitrogen on because they don't want to lose out on yield, because their corn is so important for their corn size. So they don't want to lose on the yield, so they're pounding a whole bunch of nitrogen. I'm like, some of the times these guys have enough nitrogen to grow their corn crop. Right? So go and do that nitrate test.
So the nitrate test was a little bit of a separate effort from the actual calculator.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the two of them, I think, work best together, right? Which is kind of what I did in my Maizex days, is I brought those into one spreadsheet where you ran through the original base calculator, and then we tagged the N test, the soil nitrate test, right onto that, so that you could see, okay, if I didn't have a soil nitrate test, this is how much nitrogen on average we think we need to use. Now you double check that up against the soil nitrate test. Now you got two ideas sort of working together, and I think the two of them actually complement each other in terms of feeling some confidence that you're moving in the right direction. So for example, if you've got a red clover field and you put manure on, even if you run the calculator without any soil N test, it tells you need 75 pounds of N, let's say, right? Now you go out and do a soil N test on the 10th of June or the 15th of June, and it verifies that, guess what? We think you need 50 pounds of N, not 75. But having two recommendations, one of 75 and one of 50, at least that gives you some confidence that it's not a 195 that I need. I'm probably, you may not come down to 50 or 75, but having those two pieces of information working together at least pulls you back from an uninformed position.
Yeah, that's interesting. So going back to that, I've looked at some data, and is it data or data?
It depends whether you're.
I always ask that question. Anyways, but question is though this: what I've seen is that there's a range of like 30 or 40 pounds that there is no economical gain. Is that true? Like nitrogen, like they say the sweet spot was like 150.
Yeah,
right.
150.
Like that was a sweet spot. On either side of that, by a certain range, there is actually no economical benefit. Is that true?
Yeah, that's we don't talk about that much, but most of the people that have done in-depth research, including Ken Janovic and Bill Dean and others at the university and those stateside, have this very sort of flat plateau area on a yield response curve that if you can get within 20 pounds either side of the magical right end rate, the optimum economic end rate, the difference in terms of economic performance is really quite small.
Right.
I mean,
right.
measured in less than $5.
Yeah, a few dollars.
Yeah, a few dollars.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's proven out a fair bit across a range of data sets that getting to the exact right rate, of course, is a great goal, but even being 10 or 20 pounds either side of that precise economic optimum, it means you're really not losing any money.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think we think about that quite often. We're like, what's the exact number, right? And I kind of caution people that because I think that's kind of interesting. Another thing that I've noticed too, outside of that, and I've done a little research on this, and I don't know where you're at with this. So we'll get back to the story about OMAFRA, but
it's all good.
Yeah. So when we're talking about nice soil, good soils versus heavy clay, right? And the good soil might yield, 10, 20% more corn.
Yep.
Right? What I've noticed in my data is that you can't actually reduce the nitrogen in your corn, in your heavy clay. And from what I've found is that because the roots don't actually get access to that nitrogen as well as the nice soil does. Is that true or not? Or do you feel like you reduce yield on your heavy clay that you can reduce the nitrogen in that soil? Or what's your feelings about that?
Yeah. So I think that was one of the better outcomes of the original N calculator when we first introduced it, and we put a soil texture line item in the calculator. And at silt loams, you were the most efficient. It produced the most N in terms of N supplying capacity. And as you went towards heavy clays, you actually needed to add another 30, 35 pounds of N, regardless whether all other factors were dead equal, right?
Yeah.
You needed to add about another 35 pounds of N on clays. Also, as you went the other way, when you went to sands, you also needed to add about another 30, 35 pounds of N. So it really was N supplying capacity of the soil. And in our data set, it was a pretty nice curve, triangle, whatever you want to call it. As you moved heavier, you needed more N. As you moved lighter, you needed more N.
Wow.
And the loams, the silt loams, were the best at supplying N. Sorry,
let me understand this.
Yep.
Supplying N meaning that the organic matter that's releasing is supplying the additional N. Is that why or what?
It certainly would be a component of organic matter. It also might be a component of how likely those soils were to turn nitrogen over, right?
Yeah.
Or lose it. So you could imagine that, that on a heavy clay soil that sits saturated more days than you'd like it see sit saturated from, the end of April to the 15th of June, that there's a tendency there for those heavy clays to lose nitrogen through denitrification. So you might have a 3.4% organic matter heavy clay, but its odds of losing some of that residual nitrogen is higher just because of the saturated condition that the soil would sit in. You move to a silt loam that might also be 3.4% organic matter, but has really good drainage and rarely ever sits saturated. The odds of that turned over nitrogen disappearing through denitrification is much lower. So yes, organic matter plays on that, but it's also just the nature of the soil in terms of how easily organic matter rolls over into nitrate and how stable that fertilizer or the nitrate pool is against losses. And of course, I haven't talked about the sands, but you can sort of imply, well, it won't be denitrification on the sands, but it might be movement out of the root zone, right?
Yeah. So that goes back to the same thing. So let's say I'm yielding, nice soils, right? My expectation is 200 bushel, right?
Yep.
And my heavy clay, I'm expecting 175.
Yeah.
So let's say done all the math, and based on rotation and everything, I'm at 180 pounds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
On the 200 bushel, nice soil. Am I changing anything for the 175 on the clay?
Yeah, well, I think if you put the numbers into the calculator the way it sits today, you've got sort of forces there that are sort of competing against each other. So I'm putting more N if you use a yield goal estimation, which the calculator does. So I'm upping the nitrogen because of high yields on the silt loam, right? But I'm lowering it on the silt loams because of N supplying capacity.
Right.
I move over to the clays now. I'm lowering it because of lower yield, but I'm raising it because of the N supply capacity. And so you might end up with a bit of a wash in terms of those numbers. I should clarify that the whole idea of whether you should even adjust nitrogen rates for yield is still a huge controversy. Most of our colleagues to the state side, right, whether it be Michigan or Ohio, if a farmer goes to the Michigan or Ohio sites and asks for their government-approved nitrogen recommendation, they don't even ask you what your yield is. It's not even part of the discussion, right?
Oh, wow.
And so when Ken and I, arrived at the point that, no, we think after you've described the field in all other ways, previous crop, soil texture, where you're located, et cetera, after you've described all the field carefully, that yield did have an influence on how much nitrogen you need, but that's a heavily disputed and discussed idea.
I just wanted the framework around it,
Yep.
right? I mean, I still use the graph, and I love the graph because, based on my soil type, I actually do the test, and I'm looking at the test and what the potential is, and I'm still using that graph for that purpose, right?
Yep.
And so that graph works good. Well, how do people find that again, that graph?
It probably exists on an OMAFRA page somewhere.
Do you have Go Corn?
Well, Go Corn is still.
Would that be on that?
Yeah, there's recommendations there.
But that graph specifically will be on that Go Corn.
I'm not 100% sure. That was what the last thing I did before I left OMAFRA and joined Maizex.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100%. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, OMAFRA has a new Agri suite. That has all of their N recommendations or P&K recommendations on a site that I think it's all there. And of course, the Maizex N tracker has it all sitting there as well.
Right.
But there's a bunch of, and if you send a soil nitrate test to a lab, it'll often come back with that graph or that table that you're talking about right there with your soil N test recommendations.
Right. So I haven't, we'll still go back to OMAFRA, but I'm still curious. I've never done much leaf tissue sampling and that kind of stuff. Is there any real qualified science behind testing your leaf tissues and seeing what nutrients are in there so you understand, what's going on? Or is it just too late in the season by the time you're doing that? It's like it's too far gone? Or what's the purpose when people do that kind of stuff? What are they looking for?
Well, if we stay on the nitrogen theme, I think we were always pretty confident that a soil nitrate test taken on the 10th or the 15th of June gave you a better recommendation than a tissue test.
Right.
The tissue test. I mean, soil nitrate tests are not overly stable. They're moving a little bit as well as the season goes along, especially once you get past knee-high corn. Soil nitrate tests start to drop because of the uptake by the corn crop.
Right.
But in that window from the 5th of June to the 15th of June, there's a pretty stable window that gives you a nice look at a soil N test. And I think it's always been more reliable than a tissue N test, especially looking at, okay, I need something to guide me as to what my side dress rate is going to be, right? So on the nitrogen side, I think the soil N test has always outshone a tissue N test. But if you start thinking about other nutrients and deficiencies, right, whether it's zinc or sulfur or manganese, then I think there's a real opportunity where you're looking for deficiencies and trying to deal with those deficiencies to use tissue tests, but sort of as a targeted, and often more targeted towards the micronutrients than the N, P, and K.
Yeah. So I've not been no full disclosure. I've not been a real into the Y drop and the research on that machine that goes across and checks the
Green Seeker,
whatever
type of equipment.
That came out. Is it still around? Is it still like? Is there any science behind that? That's actually valid? Because the reason why I didn't have much faith in myself is just because of tiled fields. Was it tiled? Was it not? What are you actually looking at? In that moment, and it just what I realized one year I was checking it out. I went from I checked the dates, and from knee-high corn to tassel coming out in some of the better corn, it was 21 days, 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, I mean, it don't give you much time for nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, you might as well have your nitrogen down and put a little extra if that's how you're concerned about and get that job done at once instead of going through that corn another time. And isn't 80% of nitrogen used up at tassel time? What's the rules about that?
Oh, yeah. We're about a 65-35 split at tassel time. That is 65% of the nitrogen is already in the plant.
Yep.
But there's still a full 35% of the total end balance that has to move into the plant post tassel. So
there's still a bit.
But so I don't know whether that changes your opinion on how to manage nitrogen. We get excited about the idea of spoon feeding. We love to use the idea of spoon feeding, and there you imply, multiple applications of nitrogen, right? Not just one at planting or pre-plant, and then not just one more at side dress time, but at least another one in sort of the Y drop or late application, after the 5th of July sort of idea, right? In my efforts to try to prove that was a winning formula, I often came up that it really didn't matter much about that. Spoon feeding approach did not change much for me, right?
Right.
I think most of the data that I've looked at across North America supports that idea that multiple applications, spoon feeding nitrogen, just the right amount of nitrogen at just the right time, has rarely been as successful as what you intuitively think. Oh, well, maybe that is a much better way.
Well, the issue too is we're not in greenhouses, right?
Well, yeah.
The environment is the biggest factor in yield. Right.
And if your soil is pretty stable and you're not going to lose nitrogen that you've applied, right? Then how could there be an advantage to later and later applications of nitrogen? If I put down 150 pounds of N on the 28th of May and I'm on a stable, well-drained, loam soil and it isn't going out the bottom and it's not denitrifying off the top, then that pool of nitrogen is pretty stable to supply the corn crop as it moves through its growth phases. Those who could argue against us on this anti-spoon feeding situation would be, I'm on a very sharp sand. There's just no way I can put 150 pounds of N down or 200 pounds of N down at planting and hope that it's going to stay there through to, post-tassel.
Right.
And so I think there's very solid evidence to do at least a split application, to not put it all down in May, but to save it for at least a portion of that to go down in a June side dress timing application, whatever equipment you want to use to put it down. I think, after the split, the multiple splits becomes maybe a bit more challenging to defend, with the exception of those growers who are convinced that their soil just does not hold on to N as well as a beautiful silt loam in Oxford County. Right.
But you're also, last research you've done is a lot about around stabilizations, right?
Yes.
That's been a big part of the last little bit, is that you're like, hey, spend the extra, whatever. What is it? How much are you going to spend extra?
Yeah, say $10.
$10.
Yeah.
And put a stabilizer, especially when nitrogen was $1 a pound.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's when it really starts to pay off the extra little insurance, right? So that's been the background.
And so I think all of that comes together into a, there's no perfect solution to nitrogen management, but you can also go too far both ways. I think, you can have the grower says, I've got it all figured out. I put 225 on 1st of May, nothing's ever short, and I drive on. Well, obviously there's environmental and economic reasons that say, you got to move away from that. And then there could be the other extreme approach, or, I put nitrogen down 4 times over the course of the year and I stabilize it every time. Well, probably there isn't an economic return to being that extreme either. But certainly somewhere in the middle is kind of where we resided. And we talked a little bit about this earlier. One of the intriguing things that we still haven't figured out as well as we'd like to is what is the actual end supplying capacity of the soil, and more particularly the back half of the farm versus the front half of the farm, or the depressed areas versus the knolls. How much N am I actually getting out of the soil? Fertilizer, remove it from the discussion. What's my N supplying capacity of the soil? That we still need to do a better job of being able to assess how much N am I actually getting from the soil. And if you know that, it really does add to your ability to manage nitrogen better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's cool. Hopefully the people don't get confused in the whole roundabout. But anyways, that's awesome. So you're working there in OMAFRA. At what age did you start?
38.
38.
38.
I didn't know you're that far along. And was Peter Johnson working that time?
Yes.
Yeah. And
I still joined OMAFRA even though I knew Peter Johnson was working there.
Wow, that's saying a lot. No, so he must have been a lot of fun though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he was already working there when you started.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you're working alongside him for 15, 20 years?
Yeah. 17 I was in OMAFRA 17.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. And so would you guys see each other quite a bit?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're working down the office, down the hall type thing?
Yeah. He was not in Guelph at all. He was always in a London office, or more London way, right?
Yeah.
But in those days, once we sort of got things rolling, and it was a bit of a new vision for OMAFRA, because we weren't just soil and crop specialists who maybe had a soil probe in their truck or trunk, it was a bit of a new vision of we were going to be more involved in doing research / extension, right? We weren't. Well, I remember when I first met with the Corn Producers Association early in my career. I said, I don't think there's enough good information out there for me to just be an extension guy. Right? I'm going to run out of things to extend, March the 31st, right? So we need to have active research, demonstration, working with soil and crop, working with the university, and of course, all of my colleagues at OMAFRA. So I think we became a fairly dynamic group, as field crop specialists, to push the bar, to do lots of sort of interesting, challenging stuff that gave us a ton of ammunition to talk about when it came winter, right?
Yeah.
Peter Johnson, Horst Bonner, myself, my colleagues, Mike Cobra, Brian Hall, a range of us, all of us, Ian McDonald. I shouldn't start mentioning names because I'm going to miss. But at any rate, because we were so actively involved in finding research dollars and chasing projects and working on things, when November 30th came, we were loaded up and ready to go to the meetings and deliver new stuff, good stuff, cutting edge stuff, which still to this day sort of, I think excites me that there was an era there where we really changed what we brought to the table in the winter meeting circuit. Is that, hey, we've just spent all summer working hard, right?
Yeah.
To be able to bring good stuff to the table. And that's
cool.
When I think about that excites me about my OMAFRA days. Then when the winter meeting season hit, we were ready to roll with I think pretty good stuff.
With new data and good data.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying basically is you guys kind of had a synergy. amongst you? Like you're working on something, Peter was working on something, Horst Bonner was working on something, and then sometimes you worked on a project together type thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sharing equipment,
Yeah.
sharing supplies, sharing summer
Information.
students.
Yeah.
Occasionally Johnson would bring lunch to me if I was desperate, And excuse me. So yeah.
Yeah.
Good synergy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Actually, when I first started, that's why I got you asked about the church I was going to. It's actually Horst Bonner's son.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I just became friends with him. So
Nice.
But anyways, so you're there 17 years. Right?
Yeah. We are now up to 2015.
Yeah. Okay. And then you move on from there to Maizex.
Right.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so then you spend what?
8 years.
8
Exactly. To the day.
Wow. 8 years in Maizex. Cool. So what was your job and role there?
So I was the lead agronomist. Essentially, I had one goal at Maizex, is that when I'm talking to our Maizex people, our Maizex dealers or Maizex staff, if you've got nothing to say to the farmer that you drive up his driveway other than how many bags of Maizex seed corn would you like to buy from us, right? Then I have failed, right? I need to give you good things to talk about that can interest that grower on a whole range of possibilities, and that you could build some trust, you could build some rapport, you could talk agronomy, you could talk stand of corn or nitrogen rates or whatever, and that the order, how many bags of seed you'd like to buy from Maizex, right, would come, but only after maybe you'd built some trust or have some fun with some agronomic discussion, right?
Right.
Hey, have you tried Y drops? Do you know what Stewart said about Y drops?
Yeah.
Did you know that Maizex did a bunch of trials on planting depth? How deep do you plant? I mean, just a whole range of possibilities. But that was my guiding principle, is if you don't have something to talk about when you drive up the driveway other than how many bags of seed you want, I, as the lead agronomist, have failed. And I think we did a pretty nice job of giving the Maizex dealers, staff, people involved with Maizex some interesting stuff to talk about rather than just what's your order today.
Yeah. So bring that all together. Your time at John Deere, time OMAFRA, time Maizex. You went on down to
Syngenta now.
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you think that your driving strength is for these companies, or for whoever you go work for? What is your driving strength? What do you feel like you bring?
I bring curiosity.
Right.
I've always wanted to know what the next page looked like. Right. I was never happy saying, okay, this is the way we're going to do things.
This is the box we're staying in.
I got to turn the page, and I've got a filing cabinet. It's about 95% full of failure, and maybe a few wins. But I bring curiosity. I bring looking outside the box, right? And then I don't know. I'd like to think that I bring a reasonable amount of enthusiasm to talk about that.
Yeah.
That issue. Okay, we've decided that we're going to chase Y drops. All right, well, that's good. Let's chase Y drops. And then we do some Y drop type research or nitrogen management research. And then I think that one of my strengths is I have a pretty good time talking about that, whether across from you at your kitchen table or at a room
a group of people
with 100 people in. I think I have a pretty good time talking to people, and hopefully they catch some of the excitement about trying to move forward as well.
Right. So why don't you just get into sales and just be done with it and just go sell to 200 people at a time? You're up there anyways. You just go close them all.
Yeah, it was because I'm a chicken.
Yeah, right.
5 kids and mortgages. That's why I didn't get into sales. Right. I had to have a real paycheck.
5 kids, eh? Mm-hmm. Really? Yeah. So what age are they now?
That's a good skill testing question. I think my youngest is a daughter, and she's 21, and my oldest is a boy, and he's 35. 21 to 35. I think that's the right range.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So I've been busy, eh?
It's busy. They're busy.
No, but you would have been busy back in the day with 5 kids.
Yeah. So just to loop back a little bit, as strange as it may seem, because in my John Deere days, working at the John Deere dealership, I had to work Saturdays because I was doing some other stuff during the week, so I really needed to work Saturdays, right, in order to make it work. Yeah. And I actually, one of the driving forces for leaving John Deere and going back to Guelph and rejoining OMAFRA was Saturday mornings not with my kids. That just, I couldn't take it. I said, dang, why have I got 3 boys at home that are out, whatever, doing what in the backyard, and I'm sitting here trying to sell this tractor, and I couldn't. I mean, I'm not afraid of work.
No,
but,
right.
When you got kids, I just had to say, no, that does not add up for me. Right. We got to do something different. I cannot be away from my kids on Saturday morning.
Yeah. So do you have like a hobby farm or something?
Yeah, we're the farm where I grew up, where my brothers entertained their younger brother coming back and trying to make a go of it. But anyway, we don't need to go there. Clearly, I moved back to Guelph for a reason. My equipment sales / my farming experience, was. Well, you know what I say. Those who can do, those who can't teach others, and those who can't do or teach work for the government. And so I fit right into that category. In '98, we moved back to work for the government.
So looking back, had you have stayed at home, would that have paid off?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, I don't know.
No,
I don't think I would have been as happy. I think because the drive to do research and to try new things, and
you wouldn't have had that opportunity.
I would have done stuff like many growers do. They're trying new things.
Sure.
But I just think the level of sort of digging into things that I like to do, I probably would have been a bit more frustrated trying to make that work while you're farming. Right.
Yeah, sometimes it makes a poor farmer trying too many things too.
Yeah, absolutely. I probably could have qualified as, oh no, Stewart tried another thing and he's going broke.
Yeah. Cool. So what's the young guys now today, right? They're out there, they're trying to make a go of it. Some like love farming, some, where'd you point a young guy to? What would you done a bit of sales, you done a bit of government research, farming's not easy to buy farmland, and that kind of stuff.
I don't know whether I can drill that down too hard. I think the idea is to try to find people that build your confidence in whatever it is you want to do. You got to have a couple of people around you, and if you don't have a couple of people, unfortunately, you have to go looking for those people, and that's not necessarily an easy thing. But you got to have a couple of people. It might be your spouse, right? It might be a family, but if it's not your spouse or your family, you got to find a couple of people who build your confidence. So regardless of what it is you tackle, lack of confidence is the number one killer, right?
Wow, I never had that.
You've got to have someone who helps you have confidence. Now, you could be David Burma and have confidence coming out your ears, and maybe my perception is you don't need as much help. But many of us need to have a person or two from early on, right? And it may not always be the same people. But whether you want to go into research or whether you want to work for Syngenta or whether you want to have a farm, you've got to have a person or two that builds your confidence.
I love that.
And go, unabashedly go looking for people that will build your confidence. Yeah. And that shouldn't happen at a bar or, this has to be people that are genuinely interested in you. Yeah. I still think that was my number one responsibility, and I don't think I actually did that great a job always of instilling confidence in my children, right? Dang it. If there's anything you can do as a father, instill confidence in your kids and have some confidence in yourself. Get that confidence. Some of us get confidence because we're on top of our game. We read, we study, right? Yeah. But true. It's however you get it. You got to have some confidence, and the only The only other thing, I guess, in terms of this, where you're going in life, you have that little analogy of a little angel on one shoulder or a devil on the other shoulder or whatever is that. I don't know the details. But it seems like in my experience working with people, and I say this sort of in the light of my confidence comments, that the little voice on your shoulder, for some people, it's always saying, you're right, you're right, you're right. And what that voice should say is, that's right. Right. And so as much as I'm a big proponent of confidence, having an internal voice that says you're looking for what's right, you're not looking to be right, is a huge sort of control on that confidence thing.
I love that.
And when you're talking to someone, right, that the voice on their shoulder is always saying, you're right. You're right, because you can't seem to manage around a situation, and that voice really should be saying, "That's right." Search for what is right. Don't you try to be right all the time. So it's that balance of, geez, I'd like everyone to have confidence in moving forward, but confidence filtered with a voice that says, "Look for what's right." Not to be right.
Because looking for what's right versus being right gives you the opportunity of being wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And I think that's super important. But I love the confidence thing. I actually never thought of that before, because it's so true. It's so true. Like, the confidence is unreal, because, it's the one thing I instill in my salesman. But, like, again, you can't do the I'm right thing. You have to have confidence to go up to the guy and shake his hand. You have to have the confidence to go up to the farmer that kicks you off the farm and go back the next, a month later and say, hey, I know you're a little upset with me. I don't know what was wrong that day. Maybe, wasn't a great day for you. Like, not put it on yourself. Like, that was because of me. Right? Because the person that says you're right is also a person that can be crushed really easily. Right? So no, 100%. Figuring what's right and wrong and being able to accept the wrong too, right?
Yeah.
Well, screw up.
And so I've moved to this final, I say final, maybe final career move as working for Syngenta in the biologicals.
Right.
Well, the biologicals it's got huge potential, but it's going to take us a while to get it figured out, right? And so to think I'm going to move forward with Syngenta Biologicals and always have the right answer and always be able to say, oh yeah, we've got it all figured out. No. You have to have the enthusiasm for what biologicals might do, but fully aware that, we're going to have to call the balls and the strikes, and we're going to have some wins and losses, and it's going to be an exciting time. But you go into something like this thinking, oh yeah, I've got all the answers. Yeah. Be careful.
That's interesting. Yeah, because the biological area is just saturated with everything, right? From people that are squeezing, mushroom manure and it's calling biological to anything. Like, it's a wild west out there, right?
It is an exciting and wide-ranging opportunity. Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. That's cool. That's a good couple of tidbits there. I do love the having courage. It's something that, I actually was, I'm going to add a little bit to that. There's a while back that I used to avoid fear.
Avoid fear?
Fearful people, fearful this, fearful everything, right?
Yeah.
And I was doing it because it just annoyed me. It just annoyed me. I hated people that were like, well, we got to watch out for this and watch out for that and watch for this.
Yeah.
But you know what I noticed too was that it was also hampering my courage. And my lesson was, in the process of it all, you can't actually be courageous without taking fear along with the journey. It's fear that actually motivates you and pushes you along, not the avoidance of the fear, right? And so that was a big change for me in that area. So it's like, yeah, you know what? You might screw up, you might get embarrassed. You might do things wrong, but like, take that along with you. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's okay to be fearful. It's okay it's not gonna go well, right?
But that's a huge learning,
right?
Like, because you can say those words to a teenager,
right,
and actually have a teenager embrace that idea,
right?
You gotta help them along through that process. Be just, oh well, you gotta get out there and fail more. Yeah, Thanks. Excuse me. Yeah. Thanks for that advice. That's what I was hoping to hear from my dad. Get out there and fail more.
It's true though.
Well, it might be true,
yeah.
but it's not easy. It's not easy to embrace, right? Even the fact, how many years did it take you to sort of embrace that you got to take some fear with you?
Oh yeah, well, talking about the failures. I mean, the amount of failures also, like, I thank goodness I started at a young age. I lived in Mexico for years. I failed down there. I tried businesses. I went down with over 100K at 19 years old, and I came back with nothing. Yeah. Right, and I started over again. So I mean, that was awesome though. Yeah. Like that's great. Right? Like that's good stuff.
Yeah, that is good stuff.
So I mean, that's what I recommend for people. Like save it up and work on it and make a business, lose it and start over. It's good. It's good.
Don't you feel that that we miss some of that? Like I don't know what it is, but society, the internet, there's so much experience that's on your phone that you get away from actually dropping things and tackling it physically yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
At 17 years old, I drove down with my brother. I said, hey, brother, let's go to Mexico. I said, let's go down there. And he was 19. I said, okay, we'll take my brother's car. Yeah. Right? And we'll rent it from him. We'll go to Mexico. And we get to Mexico. We couldn't cross the border because it wasn't our car. It was my brother's. Yeah. So we park it there. And these guys are like, well, I'm going there. I said, okay. We jump in the vehicle, the other guy. We go into Mexico. Like, that's what we done, right? Yeah, yeah. We didn't know anything better. Yeah. But was it dangerous? Well, maybe a little bit. Yeah, yeah. But we didn't know. Yeah. It was going for sure. the adventure, right? And I don't know. My parents let us go. I mean, I think what happens when you have, like, my parents had 5 older brothers, 6 kids altogether, right? Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Maybe you have lots of kids and like, all right, you were fine. They go and take a risk, One
of them will be successful.
Let's see what happens here. So no, it's kind of cool. And I think more is caught than taught. So as much as you want to push your kids, but if you leave an example for them, right? I think that's the big thing, that you show up and you actually are the one that stands up in front of 100 people, and you make a fool of yourself. And it's okay. Like you do that, so well. Not the fool part, but standing up 100 people and do your thing. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, it's the idea of finding ways to step forward, and whether it's going to Mexico or whether it's buying a dealership or an agency or a franchise or a new tractor or going to school, right? I mean, I talk to lots of kids who get afraid of the next step in school. Oh, well, I did my bachelor. There's no way I'm doing a master's. I did my master's. There's no way I'm doing a PhD. I think generally you just got to keep pushing. Yep. You got to push forward somehow, right?
Yeah. The most money I've ever lost was investing in others.
Oh, yeah.
That's the most money I've ever lost. I always say, just go invest in yourself. Go get the franchise. Go do that. Yeah. Go put your own money into what you yourself is going to control and make or break. Yeah. Right? Because it's on you. Right? Sure. Someone else, they don't care about your money like you do. Like, are you serious? Right? Yeah, so 100% invest in yourself.
Yeah, invest in yourself.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing that I worry a little bit about is that some of us don't have maybe just the support that allows us to do that. Right?
I agree with you. I agree that but the problem is us guys. Yeah. We always do things too much alone.
Yeah.
And I realized that, I went going to this new church I talked about, and then just like there's a big good support group. Yeah. Good men group. Yeah. That kind of stuff. And it's okay to be a warrior. It's okay to do things alone. It's okay to fight, but it's a much better when you can find some fighters beside you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the unfortunate reality is that you have to convince people that support network just doesn't always fall into your lap. Sometimes you have to, as painful as it may seem, sometimes you've got to reach out and say, hey, you go to the neighbor farmer who's about to retire and say, I don't really need your money and I don't need your land, but I would love to come over on a Saturday morning and kick ideas around with you. Could we do that?
Right.
Just that sort of, that scares the heck out of me even saying it. But that's kind of what we need to do if for mental health and for moving 100%. Forward. We've got to reach out and
Yeah.
and just ask people to sort of be in our corner.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You're going to get shut down.
Yeah.
You're going to be pushed away, all that kind of stuff. But you'll find the right person, 100%. I actually, it was a bunch of years ago. I'd go down by the lakeshore in Sarnia, and I'd knock on doors and ask them how they became wealthy. Right, just to ask them, just curious, and I'd be sitting in their kitchen table, talking to them over one knock on the door.
Yeah,
right. Came to after Sunday after church, and I was just half decent. I came in a nice vehicle, and they're like, open the door, and we're sitting there talking about life and how they became successful, right, amongst the most wealthiest people. So it doesn't take a lot, just showing up. Just show up.
I think we underestimate how many skilled, successful, confident people are actually quite eager to
100%.
be a friend, to help, to give, some advice, right?
100%.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, you have to reach out,
driving up and knocking on doors and saying, "How did you get to be a success?"
Yeah. I'm just curious, right?
Yeah. We may not all be able to match that sort of boldness, but maybe up the gravel driveway to the neighbor to talk to him. We could. I have a son who sort of sounds a bit more like you, so he's in Montana.
Yeah. Nice state.
And he's gonna he did eavesdrop,
okay.
right?
Yep.
And he's moved to Montana to do eavesdrop. Well, there are two problems with Montana and eavesdrops. It doesn't rain, and they don't have enough tree leaves to plug the eavesdrops in the first place. But he just goes out and talks to people, and
he sells.
He sells.
He's a salesman.
He sells, and you can sell eavesdrops in Montana just about as well as you can sell eavesdrops in Ingersoll.
100%.
Right.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. Yeah. Showing up. That's what it is. Well, that's awesome, Greg. I didn't, we have no agendas when we start these things.
We sure did not.
No. And,
I tried to beat one out of you because that's the way I am, but we had to do it without one. Okay.
And these ladies usually give me some notes or whatever, and I'm like, whatever. I'll just wing it again. So that was awesome, Greg. No, we'd love to have you out again, and I would love to have a business that I could hire you. I mean, that's the thing that I would love to have, because you're an amazing guy, and all the research that you've done in the past has been so useful for farmers, honestly.
Oh, thank you. It's been a fun ride, and when I made this last career change, I said, well, 63 is the new 43, right?
Well, if you're healthy and you have the energy, why not, right?
I'm not sure anyone in my family actually agrees with that statement, but it sounded good at the time.
You know what people don't realize? This is the thing, Greg. People don't realize there's an age that we stop at in our head.
Yeah.
There's an age that we stop at when we're like, you know what, we're still this age. You see guys, I never understood why old guys drove Corvettes. I never understood that.
Yeah.
And now I get it.
Yeah.
It's because that their mind, they're still 25 years old.
Yeah.
Right? Their body ain't 25, but their mind's 25.
Yeah. My mind might be younger, but my knees are clearly 65 and moving on.
Yeah. No, that's how God made us. So anyways, that's great, Greg. Thanks for coming
nice
out.
to be with you.
That's
Appreciate
awesome.
the chat.
Thanks a lot. That's Dirt Grow Podcast, episode number 7. Tune in for the next one. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening to Dirt Grow Podcast, where every Tuesday we dish out the dirt. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check out dirtgrow.com for more content and episodes. I'll see you next Tuesday. Ciao.